Good afternoon and welcome to the CFA UK session focused on diversity, equity and inclusion and the organisation Girls Are Investors or GAIN. My name is Aaron Kelshiker. I'm part of CFA UK's Inclusion and Diversity Committee. We're extremely privileged to have two exceptional investment professionals who, alongside their successful professional careers, have also contributed to our industry's diversity, equity and inclusion agenda as the founders of GAIN. Some of the achievements of GAIN include the organisation has hosted over 150 events and reached over 6,000 students across the UK at 34 universities and over 50 schools. It has a volunteer network of over 400 people and has successfully launched an industry internship programme. Before I introduce our speakers, a quick mention that we will be having Q&A, so please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A box and we'll look to answer them in the session. With that, I'll briefly introduce our speakers today. Tilly Franklin is the CEO and Chief Investment Officer of the Cambridge University Endowment Fund. Prior to joining Cambridge University, Tilly has held a number of roles within investing and consulting, and was most recently the head of private equity at Alta Advisors. She's a graduate of Cambridge University and the London Business School, and has also recently received the 100 Women in Finance's 2021 EMEA Industry Leadership Award. Welcome, Tilly. Charlotte Yonge is a portfolio manager at Troy Asset Management and the manager of the Trojan Ethical Fund, where her coverage also includes multi-asset. Prior to Troy, Charlotte spent time with Rufer Investment Management. She's also a graduate of the University of Cambridge and is a CFA charter holder. Charlotte and Tilly are both co-founders of Girls Are Investors or GAIN, whose mandate it is to inspire girls to enter into the financial services industry. So Tilly and Charlotte, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's start with your own personal journeys into investing. Where did they start, and did they take any surprising turns along the way? Point in case, Tilly, I noticed that you also had a brief stint with the BBC in Washington prior to moving into the world of investment.
Sure. Well, I was definitely one of those people who certainly didn't know growing up that they wanted to work in investment by any means. I studied English literature and I thought I wanted to be an academic because everybody said, oh, you're good at this, so you should kind of keep doing it. My sort of epiphany came when I started doing my postgraduate studies. And although, you know, it was a wonderful experience in many ways, I just realized it wasn't for me. I kind of thought it would be a continuation of undergraduate life, but when I found myself sort of all on my own, it stuck in the library for hours on end. It just really didn't suit me at all. So I then kind of came back, took a job in consulting because numerous friends said that that was a good thing to do because it would give me a broad range of experience. And I only really found out about that investment management existed as a job when I went to business school in my mid to late 20s. And I was really inspired there by one of my business school professors who taught a course on basically on venture capital. He was a former venture capital investor. So it was really by serendipity that I fell into it. And I think that's actually true of many people, especially women as it happens, but many people across the industry. And so I guess that's GAIN's primary mission, really, to make sure that more people get into investment management on purpose instead of by accident, as many of us did.
So Charlotte, Tilly talked about serendipity. Was it a similar story for yourself, or what about your own journey?
It was. Yeah, I also studied a non-finance related degree. I read French and Latin, and I wanted to get some experience during the summer. I didn't know what. I sort of thought I might become a lawyer because people said to me, oh, well, Latin's very logical and you're quite like arguing, so maybe you should go into law. And in actual fact, that I grew up in Scotland where there are lots of great asset management firms. And on the eve of the financial crisis, at the time, I had absolutely no idea how lucky I was to get a job in 2008, the summer of, working for a really great investor in Edinburgh, a firm called, at the time, First State. And it really was just with a view of understanding a little bit more about the world of work, hopefully earning some money during the summer. And I completely caught the bug in terms of everybody there was so enthralled by meeting with businesses. They took me along to all of their company meetings. It was just such a fantastic opportunity for me. And then I had a further summer of university left before leaving. So again, did some more work experience actually with my current firm. And that really was serendipitous in that I've now been here for 9 years. I was previously at Ruffer, as you mentioned, for 2.5, but I again interviewed with them in 2008 in October. So it was around, I think it was the week after the sort of Lehman Brothers news had come out. And that year, Troy actually made money, which was remarkable. And it was sort of the way that I decided, okay, who am I going to apply to for some experience in London? And I noticed that they had done exceptionally well and held up very well. And they took me on as an intern. And I've since obviously come back and haven't really looked back since.
Charlotte, maybe if we can just stay with you. So, I mean, which aspects were the most useful for you in developing a career in investing? I mean, what did you, or what have you learned from some of the setbacks and challenges that you faced, along that journey?
I think, as Tilly mentioned as well, it's never a linear career, and I think the same applies for everything. But I wouldn't call it a setback. I would call it having great experience in a role that wasn't quite right, that I wasn't quite suited for. It wasn't quite right for me in private client initially, when I was at Ruffer. And I learned a huge amount, and it really just explained to me how that world works, but also what I was good at and what I was less good at and what I enjoyed less. And it really helped shape what I do now. The fact that I work a lot on stock picking, I love the sort of company analysis. It really helped me decide that I wanted to do that. And I think there are setbacks, and we can talk about some of the sort of gender diversity issues that we all face. And I think it's really kind of motivated us to start GAIN. It's a huge amount of frustration, I think, that had built before the birth of GAIN, and we continue to see that as something that needs to be addressed, but also I think as a bit of an opportunity for firms, for us to hopefully solve a problem. So I think there are lots of setbacks that people face, and I personally am often the only woman in the room, and that's quite challenging. But I also think that that's just something that we can proactively address. And I think you're all incredibly lucky to be in such a dynamic and an interesting job that really I don't see any sort of setback as insurmountable. It's really, we all need to have a positive attitude to solving the problems.
And Tilly, if I may just come back to you as well. And your journey has gone from consulting through to the world of investment management. You're leading one of the flagship endowment funds around the world. What are sort of some of the challenges, or how have you sort of faced some of the challenges that you've had through that journey? Firstly, moving across from consulting to investing, and then obviously taking a key leadership role within our industry.
Sure. Well, I think it's really important to say that, I mean, I've been an investor for over 20 years, and on the whole, so far, things have gone reasonably well, but I've also lost money on numerous occasions. And I think that's one thing that often puts people off this career, because they fear that things might go wrong. And obviously none of us wants to lose money. We all want to make money for our investors, and we do. But I think you have to accept that you can't be right 100% of the time. And what I have found actually is that the occasions where things have gone wrong, or they're incredibly painful, were the things that I learned the most from. And particularly in an earlier phase of my investment career, I worked directly in private equity. And, times when you've had, very difficult board discussions, businesses running out of money, changes to personnel needing to be made, and so on. Extremely stressful periods of time for everyone involved. But I feel like my experience was really forged in those moments, and I've used those skills, on countless occasions, even when things are going well. Maybe you learn just diplomacy skills through being in a difficult board meeting, and then you can just bring that to bear on numerous future occasions. So I would say to people, don't be put off by the fact that things might go wrong, because you'll make every effort to ensure they don't, but sometimes they will, and then you'll learn from it. I think also, just on a very, very personal note, when I had my 2 children, I struggled with the job that I was in at the time, with sort of no ill will on either side. It was just a very unpredictable role. And in the end, I decided to go and look for something different. And at the time, again, it seemed like a big disaster, because I really loved that job. But actually, that was the moment at which I moved from the direct side to becoming an allocator. And as it happens, I'm much better suited to the allocator role. I really, really like the breadth of it. I think I'm probably a better judge of people than I am of businesses. I think you have to be, somewhat skilled at both, obviously, but I think sort of my relative strength is in the former. So again, the career setback, which seemed like a disaster at the time, ended up being a great opportunity.
So thank you for sharing that. And just coming to why you decided to focus on the early pipeline. I mean, we have a lot of we have initiatives within within industry at large. We've had the focus at various levels, including board levels, board level conversations for FTSE companies. We've had the Hampton Alexander Review, which is now coming to the end of its 5th year. The representation is basically a third female representation on FTSE 350 boards. We've also got the Parker Review as well, where the shocking statistic is still that 59% of FTSE 250 boards don't have a single person of color in terms of their representation. So I just wanted to we have a number of initiatives, but your focus is very much on the early pipeline. And it'd be great to hear why you chose to focus your efforts there.
I'm happy to sort of make a start, and I'm sure Charlotte will add to it. But I think, what happened was both of us, before we even met, I think both of us were struggling actually with the recruitment in our own firms. I think I was at Alta Advisors at the time, and Charlotte was obviously at Troy, where she still is today. And we were trying to recruit a sort of balanced pipeline of junior talent into the organizations. And what we found when we analyzed the statistics, and certainly at Alta, was that only 20% of the applications were from women. And as it happened to be the case, that about 20% of the investment team were female. So we thought, well, actually, it seems like we're really imbalanced, but we're actually recruiting in line with the application rate. So what we need to do to redress this imbalance is actually just to have more female applications. And so that sort of sparked a project of research actually going into schools and universities and doing focus groups with young women to find out what was holding them back from applying. And then by very, very happy circumstance, Charlotte and I were introduced by a mutual contact, and then perhaps that's a good segue to hand over to Charlotte for her thoughts.
Yeah, and it was really the same, and it was sort of personal frustration, but which was actually became very apparently an industry-wide phenomenon. I think there's clearly a retention piece as well, but there was at a time, and this is really when Tilly and I met, and Tilly had done a sort of scoping project of the UK. There was no UK-wide charity or organisation addressing this application piece, and really just a lack of role models, relatable role models out there. And yet we all know, although the statistics are not great in terms of 10% or less in certain areas of investment management, senior decision makers are female, we all, in absolute terms, that makes actually a huge number of really inspiring female investors. So for me, and you sort of asked how I got into the industry, I had actually a mother and a grandmother who were both very keen investors, one professionally. My grandmother just used to read BFT and invest her own ISA. But actually having that role model was incredibly fortunate to have that. And we're very aware that a lot of women out there would be fantastic at this job, but we just need to plant that seed of inspiration at an early stage. So yeah, really we went to universities initially, and then it became very clear actually by that stage a lot of women have ruled themselves out. So sixth form is also our area of focus to really inspire at that stage of development and thinking about careers.
Indeed. Sorry, please.
So I was just going to add actually that there was another epiphany when I did a talk at my daughter's school, as these thoughts were all sort of swirling around, and it was compulsory for A-level economics students, and so off I went thinking it was going to be really exciting and fun, and I got there and all the girls slumped in their seats looking as though they sort of wanted to literally be anywhere except there. And I had this very sort of detailed technical talk that I prepared, and I just realized that wasn't going to go over, so I just started telling them stories about interesting or like quirky investments and things that I worked on, and asking them, oh, if you were in this situation, what would you have done? And then it was actually incredibly easy to suddenly get them to all sit up, and they're like, oh no, I would have done that. Oh no, I wouldn't have done that. Oh no, I don't agree. I do agree. And I just really, there was no lack of interest at all. It was just that they had no knowledge. And I think also there's a lot of confusion between investment management and investment banking, which is also completely understandable. So some people sort of associate the two and then think, well, I don't want to work in banking, so they just, again, switch off altogether at a very early age.
Absolutely. And in terms of some of the statistics, I mean, Gain has shared that women represent only 8% of decision makers within investment management, and that only 2 out of 10 applicants are women that apply to roles in investment management. I mean, we've sort of talked it through from from various general points, but specifically, what couple of points would you think are really pertinent to answering that question as to why is that statistic still 2 out of 10 applicants in terms of the female representation of people applying to our industry?
Yeah, shall I start, and then I'm sure Tilly will have lots to add. I mean, it really is the original focus groups, the findings that Gain derived from that remain true. So it's these 2 things. It's a lack of information, young women actually understanding what investing is. It's not investment banking. It's not sitting in front of a computer every day and looking at spreadsheets and nothing else. It's the real world. It's actually understanding how business works. It's being a good judge of character, meeting with people. It's incredibly a dynamic and fulfilling job. And I think that information still needs to be distributed, needs to be provided in an accessible way. And that is really what Gain is continuing to endeavor to do. And then the second thing is this role model point. If you cannot see it, you can't imagine being it. And I really do think that Gain, you mentioned some of the statistics, we have such an incredible network of volunteers. I think it's around 600 volunteers today. And these women are, they don't have 3 heads, and they like to do yoga at the weekend, or they have some really interesting hobbies and a great work-life balance, but they're also incredibly good at their jobs. So they are providing that inspiration, which I think, still today is in most places, in most schools, in most universities, it's just lacking. And it is a vicious circle. If you have lots of men in the industry, particularly sort of more high profile fund managers, it's inevitable that the role models will be male. And we talk about sort of investment books here a lot, and what would you recommend for reading to an undergraduate? Not a single one of the investment books, and this is our failing, so really do reach out to the network. Anyone has any really good recommendations written by women, because I'm sure they're out there, but the sort of default list generally does not include anything by a female investor author, which I think is just a pretty damning indictment of the female talent that's out there. But also, we do need to just provide that role model of imagining, you can be the next Warren Buffett and be female. Sorry, Tilly, is there anything you would add to that?
No, I thought it was a really good summary, and now you've just volunteered yourself to write a successful bestseller, Charlotte. But no, I think it is really that connection between the real world and investing. So one of the things we do in the Gain talks that we do at schools is ask people, how do you think Apple got into business? How did Facebook get into business? They needed funding. Who was the investor? The investors are kind of the unsung heroes of new business development, and that tends to resonate with young people. I think also when we think about retention, I think it is a self-reinforcing loop that can be virtuous or vicious, in the sense that if we have more diverse applicants and then we have more diverse people in the industry, the cultures of the industry will change necessarily, because if people are in a tiny minority, of course, they sort of end up being peripheral, whether everybody wants that to be the case or not. Whereas if we have a genuinely diverse workforce, I strongly believe that workforces will just become more accepting almost as a matter of course. So I do think it feeds into the broader sort of retention picture as well.
Indeed. And I mean, we talk about the value of diversity, cognitive diversity with decision-making, investment decision-making, and the benefits that it brings. And even just in terms of the conversation is very much shifted from just the business case and the P&L, but just to the fact that we want to have better governance, we want to have better risk controls. We still have the statistics from the COP representation and gender representation within decision-making bodies with respect to climate, and climate is obviously, you know, front and center of everyone's agenda as of the moment. Just thinking about some of the you know, the tremendous work that you've been doing through GAIN and you know, some of the activities that you've been facilitating. Are there ones or real case scenarios that you'd like to share with us?
I think the internship program is really exciting. So, you know, one of the frustrations from the early days was we would go into schools or universities to give these great talks, and you would sort of have typically a really good response, and people would say, oh gosh, I didn't know about that, but now it sounds really interesting. What do I do next? And we were like, well, go to university, do really well, and then you can apply for a graduate program. You know, it was a kind of a bit kind of a deadening moment in the whole experience. So creating the internship has been really great, because, and I think one of the things we haven't sort of maybe touched upon is there's this huge appetite from the industry to try to access more diverse talent. So we're really pushing on an open door now, which maybe 10 years ago was a bit less true. So the internships that GAIN ran last summer, it was just a pilot program with 25 people, went down really well, both with the interns and with the firms. And I believe some of the individuals were second year undergrads, but some of them were final year undergrads. And of those, just under half of them actually got a full-time job offer. So there are people now working full-time in the industry because of that, which has been really heartening. And, you know, we hope that we can really scale up that effort and just help people, because people say it's hard to access this talent. And so if we can just unlock that, it'll have a big impact.
Charlotte, there's some would you like to share some of the real case scenarios that you know, resonated with you? And
Yeah, sure. So I think these internships are fantastic, and I think part of what we've been doing alongside that is providing the support and the mentorship that can really make sure that, you know, that perhaps intimidating and inaccessible exterior of the investment world is actually just dismantled for not only the interns, of which all last summer had a mentor in the industry, not at the firm that they were working at. So somebody outside, external, who can provide advice on, you know, how to behave in the workforce or how to deal with certain problems. Really, really fantastic time given by the volunteers in our network, really valuable. And we actually have mentors more broadly. So GAIN runs an ambassador program. So at every university we have an ambassador. So the universities that we've mentioned, so the 50 odd in the UK, where GAIN has a presence, that is thanks to students who have signed up to be part of GAIN and to spread the word. So they are already interested in investing themselves. They are very good advocates, not only of careers in the industry, but also of how their contemporaries, their peers who, you know, might not have really considered it, can come to a GAIN event, can get involved with the internship program, and they have made the world of difference in terms of, as Tilly says, actually connecting up the firms and the students on the ground. We did an initial talk, Tilly, Caroline and I, we were sort of co-founders at the start of GAIN together, and we went to Cambridge, and we thought, right, well, you know, this is a pretty hopefully good lineup. We're going to talk about investing, and we're going to talk about the next generation of female investors. There'll probably be a few women in the audience, and there really were like a small handful of women and majority male attendants, which was fantastic that they wanted to come and listen to us. But it
was a talk about women in investment management.
So we realized there was this disconnect, even though we'd advertised it through the usual career portals. Actually, you need to understand the students by speaking to them. So what we do now is great with this ambassador program, and I'm as an alumna of Cambridge responsible for that link between the industry and the ambassadors. I'm the liaison for Cambridge University, and that involves also having the odd call with them, the group of ambassadors, to really understand what's helpful for students. And I just listen to them. They have the most brilliant set of ideas for what events we can hold that term, what students really need. Do we want to do speeds kind of networking with people in the industry, or workshops that's born of an idea that they came up with? So there's really this great sort of flow of ideas now. This communication channel is open, and we think that that's going to be really, really helpful in getting firms to hire more women.
And they also get a mentor, importantly, our volunteers, are fantastic. They give their time, and all the ambassadors have their own mentor, which can also help them develop their careers longer term.
I mean, it's like I say, it's invaluable, really, especially at that point when you're making decisions. And you're obviously reaching to investment professionals through our own community. How can our community support you in what you're what you're going on and achieving? How can we contribute in terms of reaching out to? Is it a case of sort of approaching yourselves directly, or going through a volunteer program, or if there are messages you'd like to share with the community, then please feel free.
Charlotte, do you want to? Charlotte's a CFA charter holder, so I think you should take the lead here.
Thank you. Well, there are lots of ways, and the first thing is we'd love to have you involved. I think there's so much now that we can all do together, and as you said, I mean, Gain has, with our fantastic team, and we really should mention, Tilly and I met and helped found the charity. But really, we have this group of 5 incredible women, headed up by Tanya Tracy, who I know sits with you, Aaron, on our diversity of the CFA Diversity Inclusion Committee. And they are running the charity day to day, and they have really scaled up this group of volunteers. So there are now so many ways that you can help and can get involved. I think the most important thing is to just sign up to our mailing list, and then you will see the huge number of really exciting events that are coming up. So you can be on a panel discussion like this one, or if you prefer to do some mentoring or be in a smaller group doing a workshop on CV or interview skills, all of these events are coming up in the pipeline. And then we do have firms that get involved in different ways, clearly by the internship program. We also have an Insight Day program that's coming up where second year students, so those that are so maybe first or second year, haven't got to their penultimate year of university, can take part in getting experience. So perhaps they won't be applying to the internship program, but they just want to get a flavour for what it's like to work in an investment firm. And firms can get involved that way. So we do encourage you to sign up to that. And we also are ever increasing our sort of reach in terms of schools. So if you do have connections with schools, with networks of schools, we are always increasing that footprint and making sure that we're reaching a diverse set of school students as well as university.
I'm not sure that whether there's a chat function, but the website is www.gainuk.org. So maybe if we can circulate that to the attendees, it'd be really helpful. And you can just sign up there. It's really easy. There's just you can just put your email address in, and then you'll be on all the updates.
Thanks for sharing that. So I've just put that into the chat. Hopefully that's correct. And yep. So please feel free to reach out to Gain and to sort of action the points that Charlotte shared with us on the webinar. So we're just coming towards the end of our session and our time. I just sort of ask, again, we have a Q&A which is available. So if you have questions, then please feel free to share them in the Q&A. I'll probably just give you a quick heads up, Charlotte and Tilly, because a couple of questions I'd like to ask you is what advice would you have for your younger self as one question? And then secondly, which motto or creed do you live by? So I'll let either of you answer either of those questions, whichever one you'd like to first.
Sure, I'm happy to go first on the advice. I think I probably give myself 2 pieces of advice. One would just be always just speak up more, because I think back to my sort of younger days in my career, and I would always sort of I'd often be sitting in meetings and sort of hearing a debate going and thinking, well, isn't one of the answers, X? But I think that's so obvious, why isn't anybody saying it? They must already know that. And then somebody else would come up with the same suggestion and everybody say, oh, that's a good idea, and I was like kicking myself that I hadn't brought it up myself. So I do think that's something that many young people that I know feel very nervous about speaking up or contributing their ideas. And actually at the endowment, we always ask our most junior team members to go first in making their contributions, just to make sure that their voices don't kind of get drowned out by all of us lot. And I sometimes joke to my colleagues that it's now very difficult to shut me up. So there's probably some optimal moment in my life where I kind of spoke the optimal amount, whereas I went from never speaking to kind of going on all the time. And then the other thing I would say is, really for don't stress out if you don't get into your sort of dream job on day one. I mean, it took me probably like 15 years to get into investment management and into the type of role that I found I could really sort of contribute my best to. So hopefully it doesn't take everybody that long, but the only way to find out about yourself and find out what you're good at professionally is just to throw yourself in. And it doesn't really matter, I don't think, what people do for their first job, their second job, even their third job, but what you need to do is figure out what you enjoy and what you're good at, and then for the next one, look for something that just offers more of that and kind of less of all the other stuff, and you'll get there in the end. But I think of a career as an evolutionary process. So maybe for that reason, I find it difficult to give one maxim or creed. So I think maybe I'll hand that over to Charlotte in case she has a better suggestion.
Thanks. Yeah, in terms of the advice for my younger self, quite similar to Tilly, I think it's very easy to assume that people who speak the loudest know the most. I think actually you need to have a little bit more confidence. And I think perhaps as a vast generalization, but us women are more likely to only put ourselves forward if we're 100% sure of the answer. And as Tilly said, we never are. This is more art than science. And particularly as someone who's young, and by definition, we are diverse in this industry, then your perspective is really valuable. So don't count yourself out just because people around you seem more confident. Actually, a lot of people are just winging it and faking it till they make it. So just having that awareness that actually don't necessarily believe that the bluster. That would be the advice I'd give to starting out in the industry. In terms of a creed that I live by, I think probably the one that I've heard that's had the most impact on me. I remember my grandmother always used to say, and this is sort of probably sounds quite trite, but the way she said it certainly wasn't. Said, but just make sure that you leave the world a better place than you found it. And I think actually being in investing now, we're in a really, really strong position to try and do that. We do a huge amount on ESG at our firm. I think the industry is really waking up to the urgency with which we need to do this, and responsible investment is seeing a huge amount of support. And there are some really fantastic female role models in this space as well, driving the change. So I think that's something where we can incorporate that creed into our everyday role. Is we can have a positive impact, not just on the returns for our clients, but also that sort of wider impact on society, on the environment.
No, indeed. And the conversation with respect to responsible sustainable investing is that we've had investing, which in a lot of ways is now deemed traditional, and now this movement towards responsible sustainable investing. It will just be investing. Some of the criterion is so key, so clear: carbon metrics, social opportunities, and risks. And obviously, governance has always been a pillar. As a former portfolio manager, CIO, and sort of coming up from that route, governance has always been a very strong pillar. And then obviously adding the social opportunities and risks, and obviously the environmental aspects is really key. And even that whole agenda now is expanding, into beyond climate and looking at biodiversity. And we have many, many, many initiatives on the social front as well, including the EU's draft of the social taxonomy, amongst other initiatives. So very, very key. And that almost hopefully is a structural support to try and really facilitate and improve inclusion, equity, and diversity within our industry. So with that, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Tilly and Charlotte for very kindly taking the time for our conversation. It's been brilliant to hear both about your personal stories as well as the fantastic achievements that you've had through GAIN. As mentioned, with respect to the community, if anyone has an interest, then please do reach out to GAIN. We will be, very happy supporting from our side on CFA UK's Inclusion and Diversity Committee. As mentioned, Tanya Tracy very kindly volunteers together with me on the committee, so obviously we'll be continuing to have meaningful conversations there. And so with that, I'd also just like to take the time to thank everyone for joining our call and listening to the insights shared by Charlotte and Tilly this afternoon. And so with that, I wish you all a very good afternoon.
Thanks so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much.